for coming, and thank you everybody that might be watching from home. Hopefully people keep trickling in. But what I plan on doing today is two things. One, kind of giving you guys a rundown of highlight of everything that we do at Coal Career Center. At the same time as a PowerPoint will be I was thinking about using the PowerPoint to guide the discussion, but the PowerPoint has like 56 slides. It's a quick snapshot of everything that we kind of have captured so far at Coal Career Center. And so I'm not going to talk to the PowerPoint. I'm going to have that kind of played in the back, and if there's anything that you see there that captures your attention and you want to ask about it, just put your hand up. I can stop where I am in the highlights and ask you a question. So I'm going to kind of, and if you want a copy of that, you can absolutely have it. But really, we do ask our teachers and our instructors to try to capture the experiences and the learning we can have so we can share it for things like this, and to present to our 8th graders, our 9th graders, and our 10th graders about what some of the experiences are that are going to be at Coal Hollow. So that's going to that'll replay, and Courtney, you can just hit it and go along as fast or as slow as you think people can handle. Every high school has a tech center. We serve Richford and Enosburg and all the surrounding schools. This year, we also have students from BFA St. Albans, BFA Fairfax, and MVU. They can attend because they don't have a forestry program in St. Albans, or if there's over enrollment at some of their sending tech centers like Essex or Northwest Tech in St. Albans, they can come here. So we've been starting to get more students here. We have them in construction, business, and we have next year, I think we have 8 out of district students from BFA and MVU who have applied. And so that's great. It has led to over enrollment, so we've got to figure out how to get everybody on the wait list and get enrolled so they all can have access to a tech center program. We have 6 core programs: forestry, automotive, construction, medical careers, business leadership, and human services and education. Those are all directly aligned to where the most jobs are available in the state. So construction trades, medical careers, all those are where most of the jobs are. And then we also have a program for 10th graders called Pre-Tech, and that's where they can begin their career exploration and start focusing on some of the things that get ready for a program. We have 3 core values there on the back that kind of guides all of our decision making. That kind of guides what we do here. That's connections, experimental learning, and employability. We value connections, so we value our connections with the community. We have a lot of kids that do cooperative learning, so they're out working with employers. We value the connections we make with the students and the relationships, and we try to explain to them that is one of the most important skills that you can have, is building those relationships and building those connections and building your network. Experimental learning, that's just a hands-on piece that kind of goes hand in hand with what happens at a career tech school. And then obviously employability, just making sure that they are ready for the world. We have advisory boards that we meet twice a year with industry employers that tell us what's lacking and what they need. And over and over and over again for the last 5 years, we need kids to just show up every day ready to work. It's not even show up with all these skills, it's just show up every day. And so we put a lot of emphasis on dependability, attendance, and then some of the other ones like problem solving and being self-directed and having some initiative are also some of the employabilities of skills that we push. So those are our core values that we try to base our system on. And then within that, there are 3 areas that we focus our programs on, and that's employability, the technical skills, and the academic skills. So obviously we're pushing the employability skills. We have 6 core employabilities that we celebrate every 6 weeks. We nominate who was the most dependable, who was the most self-directed, who showed good, effective communication. So that is just something that's what we celebrate. If you see what's on our Facebook page, if you see what we put in the messenger, we believe that what you celebrate and what you acknowledge is what it shows you what's important to us, and that's what it is. So those are the employability skills. Technical skills kind of speak for themselves, that each program has technical skills that go along with that. That's the next thing we focus on. And then, hey, what's going on? You want some pizza?
Yeah.
All right there. And then the academic skills. So, and so those things are all measured in a variety of ways. Some is a national curriculum, some is state curriculum, some is like for the medical careers, it's a board of nursing, the LNA program. That's some prescribed academic and technical skills there. So, so those are the three areas that we focus on in programs. And then the other thing that you should know about all tech centers is we have program quality standards. And so every program that is offered in a tech center has to have 3 components to it, or 2 out of 3 components to it. And those are, they need to have industrial recognized credentials, they need to have college credits associated with that, and they need to have work-based learning associated with that. So if you are in our programs, for example, if you're in medical careers, you're going to earn upwards of 12 college credits. You're going to learn medical terminology, intro to health sciences, nutrition, and I don't want to say not even physics. I'm not sure they have 4th one, but they have 4 CCB classes that are taught within that program. So they earn 12 college credits, and they earn their LNA, which an LNA is an industry certified credential. And so in the program of studies book that I handed out, those basically outline for each program what are the industrial recognized credentials, what are the college credits, and where are some of the work-based learning experiences that take place. I mean, right now we have people everywhere from Franklin County Rehab to Champlain Chevy to Fit In Roots to Our Lady of the Meadows. And so again, those are where those are our program quality measures. I don't want to go over each one because, like I said, there's a lot. There is some overlap with credentialing. Like we give all our students first aid, CPR, OSHA 10, so they get all those credentialing. But some of the more high-level ones, like their CDL, their LNA, NCCR core, logger training, logger safety and first aid, those are program specific. I'm throwing a lot at you, so if you have questions, or if you have any questions on some of the places we've gone or seen, again, just raise your hand and ask. Some of the other things that we've been trying to do is more outreach. So like I said, we serve mostly 11th and 12th graders in our programs, 10th graders in pre-tech. We do host a shadow day, a hands-on experimental learning for all of the 8th graders in our SU. So they'll come and experience each program and do hands-on activities. We've got a lot of data that says that visit help them, figure out what they want to do, and I think it helps with them get a little bit of direction in their 9th and 10th grade years. So when they get here as 11th graders, we do presentations for all 9th graders so they can learn about pre-tech, and we just got done hosting our tours, shadows, and presentations for all the Enosburg and Richford 10th graders to learn about programming. So they can, because they're signing up for classes right now for next year. And as you can see from this, the first part of this presentation was really about exposing students to things. We have a lot of colleges come in and talk to students. We have a lot of employers come in and talk to students. One of the things that we have found is it's sort of like me throwing all this information at you right now. It's like, whoosh, and they don't always they don't know what they don't know sometimes, and so we try to bring them to as many places as we can. That's Tri-Major Day at probably VTC at Randolph. And we do that because we've had a lot of students come back and just really appreciate the fact that we showed them where places were. So even though they don't know what they want to do per se, that we've had students come back and be like, you know what, I've got a job now at Ben & Jerry's or Barry Callebaut, and the reason I do is just because they knew where the front door was and they knew where to go. And so that's just one of those things where, just having them be able to experience it and see it and knows what is happening in that building sometimes can be enough for them to just go back there and ask for a job. We've had PC and other companies come here and they're talking about their benefit package and their matching 401ks and their low health. And our students not all of them know that they need to know that or how good of a benefit package that is because they haven't, been in the workforce like that yet. So just having the experience and seeing those places, they can always come back and ask questions, or they can always say, all right, what was that about a 401k? I'm starting to be interested. So it's not a straight line. It doesn't mean that, every kid that leaves here is, knows exactly what they want to do or where they're going, but that doesn't matter. We're always here for them after the fact. We have a lot of students come back, ask for their resume. We've got to get them back on their Google Drive and print it off for them or wherever the case may be. So it's really, we're always happy when they come back, whether they come back and be like, hey, I've got a job that I make a lot of money doing what I love, or if they come back and be like, I'm looking for a new job, who was that contact at, SD Ireland. So, and that's really what it's all about, making sure they're successful after they graduate. Any questions about what you're seeing on the PowerPoint slide? All right.
Do you help them write that first resume?
We do have them write that first resume. Before they can co-op out, they need to have a cover letter, a resume, and do a mock interview. And every one of our students has a portfolio, so they can refer to that to start putting in what certifications they have, evidence of what learning they did. So ideally, when they go to that interview, they can not only say, this is what I can do, but ideally have some evidence so they have some talking points, because not everybody's really good at talking well about themselves at times.
Right.
So it's a skill. So yeah, they have to write that first resume. I know the high schools require that too, so it can, and then we continue to try to update it. Mm-hmm. And with the AI tools these days, it's getting a little easier. But
Yeah, it knows more about me than I wanted to.
yeah. You can see this is highlighting our employability. Again, there's probably going to be some pictures in here about our kids with perfect attendance. And so every program in the morning and afternoon, we try to recognize when they highlight one of our employability skills. We have a lot of usually the first quarter we have a lot of perfect attendance, but it's Vermont, and right around November a few students seem to miss for, I don't want to say it aligns with our wild game dinner, but it might have something to do with it, that they're out, doing something that they love, for sure. Other questions about anything you've seen or heard about co-op?
Are there places that do not accept what you do here?
As far as?
Well, maybe we don't want the kids coming right out of the Cold Hollow training and going into the business, or?
I think maybe when I first started, that was maybe the case. Now with the industry, with employers kind of hurting for good employees, they're knocking at our door constantly and wanting to either put them in their training program. I was just on a call the other day about a flooring company they were flooring installation in Vermont. Mm-hmm. Everything from hardwood to tile. They were 24 strong 5 years ago. They're down to 8, and they're scrambling. They can't keep up with the demand. They want to create some sort of, you're going to see a lot of companies are creating, they're reaching out to the tech centers to create a pipeline of how can the businesses create these, get them into the pipeline to get into that career. The construction trades, they've all kind of banded together. They're actually starting a post-secondary school, and they're going to be trying to take graduates of construction programs to get them right in that pipeline, and then fed out to I think there's 6 or 7 of the larger companies that are funding that school. So I think in the past I would have said yes, but now they're if you've got a work ethic, and that's the other thing that we have to continue to teach is, that's not always a given these days too.
Yeah, are there a lot of machine shops around where you train the students to run the machines?
We don't.
Are computer operated now. That was when I was in the accounting industry a few years ago. That was a huge void because they could not get the kids or the young ones to come in with the computer skills to run the machines.
Right. And that's something that we're trying to, that's where we're trying to, we don't offer any of that here at this time. And there's some tech centers that do. They call it mechatronics or advanced manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And what they have found is it's expensive to start, but they also found a lot of high school students at that age aren't thinking of manufacturing as a legitimate career path.
Right.
What we're doing to make sure students are aware of that is we're bringing students to Precision Tools, Med Associates, every single place in the industrial park in St. Albans, mm-hmm. where they can see that it's not the old, manufacturing where you're, the Charlie Chaplin model is problem solving and hands-on and high paced and a lot of problem solving. So high wage too.
High wage.
And so again, we're hoping that just by making them aware of it. Mm-hmm. We brought some kids to Barry Callebaut, and they were like 70% of the chocolate in America comes out of this plant. It's mind-boggling, or Ben & Jerry's when you have 27 tractor trailer trucks leaving there every day with ice cream. The scale is amazing. So they're not necessarily knowing they want to go there, but after a couple of years of maybe working on a local employer, they say, hey, wait, maybe I want to go get a 40-hour a week, job and benefits. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So. Other questions about either CTE or COLA? Did you keep up with me on this?
Awesome. Great.
All right. Well, I will turn over to the budget portion of the day. Thanks so much.
I think you're going to hand your mic to Morgan. I've been told that my voice is louder.
Thank you.
Just flip the mic.
I'll turn the lights on, yes.
I gotta do something.
We're in here.
Was I not loud enough last night?
No, I brought you a lapel, but it doesn't work.
Oh, that's okay. So you want me to stay here instead of wandering?
You can wander. This will
Okay.
pick up pretty far.
Okay. Perfect. So while Morgan is getting his mic for the video, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Lynn Cote. I'm the superintendent for Franklin Northeast. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. So FNESU is near and dear to me. I am a product of FNESU schools. I grew up in Montgomery, attended school there. I have raised my 4 children here. They have all graduated from FNESU schools, and now I'm the proud Mimi of a preschooler here in Enosburg. So what happens here is deeply personal and important to me. This is my 30th year working in FNESU, and I have had the opportunity and privilege to work in several of our schools and now here at our central office. So we're going to work hard today to give you information about our system and about our budget, and we're open to questions and comments. At the very end, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the education transformation plan that the governor has been presenting in the state of Vermont. So I'll be open to questions, and we'll do our best to answer what we can there as well. So you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Morgan Daybell. I'm the CFO for Franklin Northeast, and I've been here for about a dozen years. Prior to that, I was on the school board in Montgomery for about a decade.
So you should have an annual report here, and this is this is this year's annual report, and we took feedback on this from last year. We thought we did a pretty great job last year in our annual report, and then we got feedback that some of it was not as understandable. I think we used too many education words and acronyms, so we try to do a better job of that this year. I'm just going to start with one section here on, you could look at the celebrations page. This is stapled a little strangely, page 9. Okay. So if you look there, there are several things to be proud of. This budget presentation will focus on the Enosburg-Richford Unified Union School District, and many things have happened in Enosburg-Richford to be proud of in the last year. So we had some educators who were recognized for, Deb Tannenberg, one of our Enosburg Middle High School teachers, was recognized as FNESU's Educator of the Year. We also had Kristen Baker, who works at Richford High School, who was recognized as a middle school math teacher of the year. That was a FNESU's award recipient for the UVM Educator of the Year. And Sue Hunt received Support Staff of the Year. She works at Enosburg Elementary. We had 4 state championship athletic teams, which is something to be very proud of here at FNESU. And we also had several students who had some pretty amazing accomplishments. Just a few of those that we highlighted in this book. Jessie Allen, who actually Nate just highlighted, she not only has served as past president of FFA, but is also the reporter this year as well. Carter Blaney, 2-time gold medalist for Skills USA. And Marshall Moffitt, who was a Richford graduate last year, received a pretty prestigious award this year in his first year at UVM. He's one of 2 young people in the state of Vermont who received the John Lewis Youth Leadership Award for his commitment to social justice, equity, and inclusion. So we're very, very proud of all of these students. Michaela Shagnon, also a Richford High School student, received the Vermont Presidential Scholar Award. So we have many things to be proud of. I'm sharing a bit of information about academic proficiency here, and you can also see similar information in your book on page 8. She has the pages memorized, so I just look at her to tell me which page it's on. So there are several ways that we measure academic proficiency. Some of the things that we're working most actively on are the measures that we use in the classrooms regularly over the course of the year so that we could demonstrate growth and success over time. So the data that you have in your book and on these slides reflects an assessment that we use called the STAR assessment. So the first chart that I'm showing on the screen is the STAR literacy data. So what that's really showing is each grade level. So the first 2 bars are first grade, then the second 2 bars are second grade, all the way up to 12th grade. And what we're reflecting in the first bar is how the students did in the fall, and the second bar is how they did in the winter. We'll measure again in the spring to look for growth. So the colors that you see there, green is an indication that those students are at or above proficiency level. Yellow is they're just barely below, so we're watching those kids. The orange color, those are kids who need intervention, and the red, those are kids that are pretty far below, and those are in need of urgent intervention. So we've just made a shift to a program that's more aligned with the science of reading. That's what the research has indicated is best for us to do. So we've got a new evidence-based programs that we're using, both for, Gab, can you say K through 5 is?
Mind you.
And then 6 through 8 is? I get those, I confuse the order of those. Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Gabrielle Lamra. I'm the Director of Instruction and Learning for a central office.
Do you want to introduce yourself? I should have been.
I'm Courtney Fletcher. I'm the district's communication coordinator and Lynn's administrative assistant.
So we're seeing that students are making progress over time. We're pleased with the progress that they're making, especially since this is the first year of a new program. We had a little thing that showed up this year in the STAR assessment for first grade, so there's a little bit of an anomaly there. When kids first start to take the STAR assessment in the fall, they take something called early literacy because most students don't yet have enough skills to take the beginning STAR literacy assessment. So it looks like we had a dip in proficiency with first grade, but that really is an apples and oranges comparison because we actually saw success because more students had the skills to be able to take that harder assessment. So we're seeing good forward progress in first grade, even though it doesn't yet look like that. I think that our spring data, we can expect to see better growth. This next one is compressed somehow. It's just a slow load. So this is our math assessment data. Similar to that, we've been working on our math programs and our math instructional practices with teachers for many years, and we're seeing that pay off. We're seeing good growth from the first assessment window to the second assessment window in almost every grade level, so we're pleased with where we're heading there. Just at a high level, some things that we're really aiming for is that we know that if we can get all students to read on grade level by the end of grade 3, that's a really good predictor of future success because they need that to be successful in all other areas. So that's something we're spending a lot of energy focusing on, and we're putting a lot of our resources towards that goal. We're also working on building the social and emotional learning skills of our students, and we know that that's something that they need to be available and be able to access what's happening in the classroom. So that's something we're working on. And Nate talked about skills. We've really made a shift to try to identify those skills that will best prepare our students for future success. So we're working on those at the high school. And there's a good analogy, Nate, when you talked about the employers, the one thing that people are saying is most important, we need them to show up. Attendance has been a huge focus of ours. Since COVID, we've seen that a lot of students have struggled to come back and consistently attend school. And for a lot of factors, we've been struggling to get kids fully back. So we had a strategy that through some federal grant money that we had during COVID, we piloted family engagement specialists whose job is to engage families in the school community and work with those families to re-engage those students in school and to improve that chronic absenteeism that we're really kind of battling, because it's very hard to get kids to proficient when we can't get them to come to school every day. So that is a strategy that we're spending a lot of time and energy on. We also have recently received a grant to collaborate with Northwestern Pediatrics. They might have a new name for some reason. I think it's a new name. But we're collaborating with Northwest Pediatrics and our family engagement specialists to work collaboratively to support families who are really struggling to get kids to come to school, no matter what the struggle is. We're trying to work collaboratively on that. So this budget presentation is centered on the Enosburg-Richford district. It's a little bit confusing. We have a supervisory union structure here. So the supervisory union is FNESU. And we have a side-by-side structure. So we have the Enosburg-Richford district that operates schools pre-K through 12. And we have a career and technical center here as well. So you can see that we have 2 pre-K through 5 schools, Enosburg and Richford Elementary School, with 444 students combined. We have 2 6 through 12 high schools, middle high schools, with 659 students combined. And we have our CTE center, and we have about 135 students who attend here. I just want to frame that those students are double counted because those 135 are a part of the 659, most of them, with the exception of some of the students that are coming from those other districts. So we operate schools pre-K through 12, and people send this district tuition money to educate students from other towns. The other side of Franklin Northeast is that Northern Mountain Valley district. They operate pre-K through 8 schools, and they tuition their 9th through 12th graders out. That's Bakersfield, Berkshire, Montgomery, and Sheldon.
So we start the budget process each year by looking at enrollment, and I'll start by saying that everything that we go over here tonight, there's more detail either in the annual reports that you have in front of you or being mailed out, on our website in the budget section or linked through the school-specific reports that are go in more detail than the annual report. If you go to the next slide, what we do is we take a look at the last 5 years, so in this case 2020 to 24, count the actual kids who are in our schools on October 1st, and then we do some projections out the next 5 years, try to get a sense of where our school populations are going. In this case, you'll see that our 2 elementary schools, Richford in the dark red, Enosburg in the dark blue, we're projecting those to stay relatively flat over the next 5 years. At the high schools, a little bit of an increase expected for both of them before they level off. Overall, a relatively flat line for enrollment. It's important to keep in mind that that's a very different story than much of the rest of the state is experiencing, especially southeastern Vermont. We're seeing a loss in terms of both their overall population and their student population. When you pick up your ballot on town meeting day, or if you pick it up early, when you have that in front of you, there's several articles that you'll be asked to vote on. The first 2 are positions to elect a moderator and to elect a district clerk. You will find one name, one person has filed for each of those, and you'll find an opportunity to write in folks if you want to. Article 3 is a little bit different this year. It's looking for voter approval to designate the supervisory union treasurer as the treasurer of the Enosburg-Richford School District. The other side, Northern Mountain Valley, has already done that. The supervisory union treasurer is Fran Jackson, who's the longtime treasurer of Enosburg Town School District and then Enosburg-Richford. She's no longer an Enosburg resident, so she can't run in a ballot position. We would like to keep her there, and so this would allow us to do that. You will also be voting on 2 school board seats, one from Enosburg and one from Richford. In Enosburg, Joshua Muir is on the ballot, looking to be reelected to that seat. In Richford, nobody has filed in time, but the incumbent is looking for write-in votes for that. And again, in the Enosburg one, you do have an opportunity to write one in. In Richford, the woman who's currently filling that seat is Devin Lumbra. It's important to note here that even though this first seat is required to be filled by a resident of Enosburg, everybody in Enosburg and Richford gets to vote on both of those 2 seats. So they're required to live in one of the 2 districts, but they're representing the whole district. The next article is the one that gets all the attention. It's the article that gives the school board and your principals authority to spend a budget amount for next year. The number that the board has put forward is just over $25 million, and we'll be going into what's making that up in a little bit. There's a second sentence on the ballot this year. It's one that we had maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and it went away. The legislature is bringing it back, and it's talking about what the per pupil education spending is for the district and how much that has changed from the last year. So you'll see here that the district per pupil ed spending figure is just over 11,000. You'll see later that that's very low compared to the rest of the state. The percentage is 8.6, which is higher than both the budget is going up and what ed spending is going up. But we'll talk about that a little bit later as well.
So when we looked at what did we spend on to educate students in Enosburg-Richford last year versus this year, we looked at what were the drivers in the change of the budget, and we broke those down to help our community members understand. So currently we are in negotiations with both our teachers and our support staff, and we settled with our support staff for this existing year after we built last year's budget. So we've had to add money into the budget in anticipation of where we think we will settle with both of those. So for this side of the district, we've added an additional $872,000. We have a few staff members where there are a lot of things happening both in Vermont and at the federal level. And one of the things that we have uncertainty about is we have some federal grant-funded positions in our buildings. So we have each school, several of our schools have strategies where they fund their interventionists through our Title I grants, our consolidated federal grants that we get. That grant funding is a little uncertain at this point. We don't know, with the cuts that are happening at the federal level, how much at risk those grant funds will be. We haven't seen anything that tells us that we should be worried that those will totally go away, although we really don't know. But we certainly would expect at a minimum that we'll see a reduction there. So we've tried to be strategic in terms of how we'll manage fewer federal dollars in supporting our schools. And some of the principals were worried about losing interventionists, as they play a really critical role in helping students get to proficiency academically. So we have made some strategic moves to shift some of those interventionists into the local budgets, and we'll go over what those staffing changes were in just a moment. And so that added about almost $183,000 to this budget. And another driver of this budget had to do with health insurance premium increases. So across the board in Vermont, health insurance is up double digits again for, I think, the third year in a row, 12.6% overall, which in this district equates to almost $200,000. Increase in other employee benefits like life insurance, dental insurance, long-term disability is another $104,000. And we saw an increase in, even though we had a reduction in students, an increase in high school tuition revenue of about $398,000. So we took that difference of how much money did we spend last year, how much money are we planning to spend this year? So this circle represents the difference between those two amounts. So of the change in spending, 55% of that can be attributed to teacher and staff salaries. This 17.2% are those staffing shifts from grants into the local budgets, and 12.6% reflects health insurance premium benefits. The 6.6% is those other employee health benefits, so that's the dental, long-term disability, and life. And then there's 8.4% that is everything else that went up. And I don't know if you want to talk at all about the other categories.
Sure, so that's really everything other than personnel. So that's the utilities, that's the amount of supplies that we spend. That's the supervisor union assessment, which covers your transportation, covers your special ed costs, covers your food service. And so all of that increases in that last piece of the pie.
So some of the staffing changes, we moved 1.8. So when we talk about 1.8 would be one full-time, and then the 0.8 would be 4 days a week equivalent. So we moved a half a school counselor back to, this was just the shift, Morgan. The half of the school counselor was a shift.
These are just from the grant positions.
Okay, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So that was previously funded through the consolidated federal grants, so that's moved over into the local budget. That's at Enosburg Elementary. We had an interventionist at Richford Elementary that we've moved into the local budget. And then at Richford Junior Senior High School, 0.3, so a day and a half of an interventionist, we've moved in to the local budget. We've made some reductions. Our work-based learning teacher at Enosburg Middle High School and Richford Junior Senior High School, we had budgeted for a quarter of a position at each of those. Nate was able to, we had previously had one full-time that we shared between Cold Hollow and the two high schools. Nate was able to find a half-time person to work here to fill that position. We were not able to find anybody to work in the two high schools, and we have other people that we've assigned that duty to in those schools, so we've removed that piece from the budget. Last year, in one of the budget defeat rounds on the Enosburg-Richford side, we removed 0.33 of a Spanish teacher at Enosburg Middle High School. That has returned to this budget. And we did a staffing shift in the budget in anticipation of a need. So we had reduced a half of a counselor here and added a half in Richford, and that was a budget move that we made last year, and we're writing that in this budget. And we had eliminated half of a school custodian at Enosburg Elementary, and we're finding that we need that back in the budget. We have a net zero change for paraeducators, but we are down 1 at Enosburg Elementary and up 1 at Richford Elementary. So those are all of the staffing changes.
And so I'll briefly walk you through how the state calculates tax rates based on that budget. Again, there is a lot more detail both in this process and what's going into all these numbers on our website. And so what we do is we start with the budget, which the board warns, and we hope you, the voters, approve next month of $25 million. We then back out 2 figures. One is about $6 million of local revenue that we anticipate coming in. The bulk of that is in high school and tech center tuition coming from other districts, primarily from the other 4 towns in the SU. We're also proposing just over $600,000 of the unreserved fund balance, which is the money that was left over at the end of 2024, to go into buying down the tax rate. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on a future slide. But what we do basically is we take the spending plan minus the money that we know is coming in, minus the money that we already know is in our bank account, and that gets to an education spending figure. The education spending figure is really the one that drives the tax rate. That's the amount of money, if this budget passes, that we take to the state and say we need $18 million to run the 5 schools in our district for next year. That figure, that 18 million, is only up about 3.5% from the prior year. To get to the tax rate, we take that ed spending figure, the amount of money we need from the state, and we divide it by the number of kids we have. The number of kids in this case is called the long-term weighted average daily membership, and it's basically looking at the last 2 years of the kids who are actually in the district, and then giving us a little bit more weight for certain kids. So if there are kids who are coming from a home where English isn't spoken as the primary language, we get to count them as a little more because they cost more to educate. If kids are living in poverty, we get to count them more. You get a little bit of a bump up for high school kids compared to elementary school kids, or middle school kids compared to elementary school kids. And so, this number of 1642, we really only have about 1,100 kids in our school, and maybe 800 of those are resident, but we do get to count more of them because of those demographics. That spending divided by the kids gets you a per pupil spending amount, which is that $11,139. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is the number that every district in the state has to calculate, and that is what drives their district tax rate. So the more money you spend per kid, the higher your tax rate goes up. To get to the tax rate, that number is divided by what's called the yield, which is a figure that's set by the legislature. This year, we probably won't have the final number until June because of all the movement going on there. But you divide the per pupil spending by the yield, and that comes up with a district tax rate of $1.30 projected right now.
Before you shift, can you just say something about the loss of the 79 students?
Sure.
And the impact on what they're going to see on the ballot language?
Sure. So on the ballot language, as we showed before, there was that second sentence on the budget article saying this would result in spending of $11,139, which is an increase of 8% over the prior year. There are a couple ways that spending figure can go up. One is that you spend a lot more. 2 is that you take in less money. Or 3, you don't get to count as many students. In this case, one of the big drivers for us and big driver across the state is that we're able to count basically 80 fewer students this year compared to last year. The reason for that is largely because of a change in the poverty numbers that everyone's experiencing. As we were going through COVID, a lot of those benefits that were tied to income levels were allowed to continue on even as people were making more money. That has all changed, and so a lot of people have been falling off those benefits over the last year. And it's not unique to us because we're a relatively high poverty district. We're probably feeling a little more than other districts, but it is a statewide phenomenon. We then need to come up with a tax rate that you'll see in your tax bills in our two separate towns in this district. We start with that district rate of $1.30, but the state knows that property values in Enosburg are different than property values in Richford. Richford also had a reappraisal 2 years ago, so their property values are a lot closer to what's on their property bill in terms of what they could sell their house for. In Enosburg, it's been a long time since you guys have had a reappraisal, and so your house that's listed for, say, $200,000, you would get a lot more if you put that on the market and sold it. And so that is done through what's called the common level of appraisal. The tax department calculates that and gives us to that the end of December or the beginning of January, and that number is now set. But what we do is we take that district tax rate and divide it by the common level of appraisal. And so you'll see here that it pushes Enosburg's tax rate up a little bit to $1.43. That would be what you actually pay on your assessed value. In Richford, it actually brings it down to below $1, about 97 cents, because their common level of appraisal is so high. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see a graph of that. So this is history since the district was unified. You can see here in Richford, this is the year that their reappraisal went into effect. All of a sudden, their grand list was not even much more accurate. It was actually probably higher than they could sell the houses for. And so their tax rate dropped and is now drifting back up as Enosburg has been kind of steady for the last 5 years.
One thing to note though, even though it looks like looks like a tax break when you look at it that way, but they paid that amount on properties that were now valued much higher, much closer to what the state says that they could sell them for. So it certainly didn't feel like a tax break to those Richford residents.
And so on this slide, you can sort of see the effect of that common level of appraisal. So in Enosburg, a house valued on paper at $200,000. Last year, the state said you could sell that for $268,000. This year, that's gone up even more to about $303,000. So they're trying to come up with what is an accurate estimate of your property value, not what that now very dated grand list shows. In Richford, that same house that on paper is worth $200,000, based on what sales have been doing there, they're saying that's only worth $185,000 last year. That's come up to $205,000 this year. And so if you think about it, if you have a house in Enosburg and a house in Richford, they're both valued at $200,000. This one is worth 50% more, and so they're using that so that you're paying 50% more in taxes than you would if it was in this town. And then we have this in the annual report and online as well. This will show our estimate right now of what you would pay based on property value and on income, and compare that to last year. So on this side here, we're just looking at property value. In Enosburg, you had a $100,000 assessed house. We're anticipating your property taxes this year would be $1,430, or an increase of $43. In Richford, where those property values are not increasing as much, $100,000, $969 tax bill, an increase of $7. On this side, on the left side of the chart, you will see what you would pay based on income. And I don't have the figures for this district off the top of my head, but I think we're about at least 50% of people pay somehow based on their income. So these both look at a $150,000 home at different income levels with the numbers that the tax commissioner has proposed right now. So if you look here at a $100,000 home, $150,000 home, and you've got a family income of $100,000, in Enosburg, you're actually seeing a little bit of a drop in your tax bill. but that $150,000 home, you're paying $2,030, whereas if you're paying without income, you'd be paying $2,144. If you're at $60,000, you're paying significantly less than that $2,144. Same thing in Richford. The numbers move a little bit differently because of the property values in the town, but you can see the same thing. And the figures, if you're paying based on your income, are the same no matter which town you're in.
Are these slides in the, on the website?
Yes. They're sort of all on individual documents, so you can go through and say, I want to grab this one and download that separately.
It would be easy enough though to put these slideshows on there. We could do that.
Yeah, we will.
We do have to.
You do have that.
Yep.
Well, we do after we go through all of
You could do it somewhere. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. You've seen this visual before if you've come to any of our previous meetings. So this visual with all the lines here on this side represents every district in the state of Vermont. It represents what is their weighted amount they spend per pupil. Okay, so this is based on so it isn't about the number of students we had. It's what Morgan talked about. It's our weighted count. So the lowest spending district in Vermont is way down at the bottom at around $8,000 per weighted pupil. The highest spending district is way at the top at around $18,000 per weighted pupil. This represents data from the school year that we're in currently. So our Enosburg-Richford UUSD is down here, this bottom blue line. This right here is just that bottom part blown up, so I'll show you here. The bottom blue line is the Enosburg-Richford district at $10,253 per weighted pupil for this school year. The interesting piece of this data is that the four lowest spending districts don't operate schools. So there's only one district in Vermont that operates schools that spends less per pupil than this district does. Northern Mountain Valley, our other district, spends $10,591 this year per weighted pupil. And they are 11th in the state, so the 11th lowest spending and the 7th lowest operating district. The red lines reflect our partners in Franklin County. Those are the other school districts in Franklin County and kind of where they fall in the comparison. The first black line here reflects what's the Franklin County average of per pupil spending per weighted pupil. And the second black line, that reflects what the average is statewide in terms of spending. One of the things that, because we are so low spending in Franklin Northeast, one of the things that our office tries to do is to get really creative to try to find opportunities to push into our school, whether that's through supports, things that we could do so that school leaders don't have to, or money or other resources. So we are always actively seeking competitive grants, and that's something that we've gotten pretty good at. One of the most recent grants that we just received for this Enosburg-Richford district had to do with Richford Junior Senior High School, and we had to replace the whole heating system over there with a pellet boiler. We received $310,000 in competitive grants for that. Our facilities director, with the help of Vern Boomhoover, with the help of our after-school program coordinator, Heather Moore, who's very good at writing grants, we're able to acquire that $310,000 to make this something that we could afford to do. We just earlier this week received something from Efficiency Vermont that let us know that because we made this change, the anticipated savings every year is about $66,000 in heating costs per year for a total over the 20 years of about $1.3 million. So that investment will be something that pays off for us for a long time. Also, what we were able to do was an LED lighting project for all but one of our schools over the supervisory union. Again, that was the facilities director. I believe this school was all relit as well, correct? Yes. So he was able to get that, and that was something that not only we wouldn't have been able to do, we wouldn't have been able to fund it on our own, but that, like the energy project in Richford, that's going to have long-term cost savings as well in terms of what we're spending on future electric bills. Heather Moore, our after-school program coordinator. We have after-school programs in all of our schools, both after school and summer. And that's something that some people might assume that every school has that, but only about half the schools in the state have after-school programs like we do. And Heather has acquired several competitive grants. Our most recent one, well, our two most recent ones, we just received $579,000, a continuation grant for the next 5 years for our after-school programs. We do fund some of the after-school program through our local budget, but we wouldn't be able to offer these programs without that grant funding. So we were the only after-school program site in the state that was offered a pass-through, so we did not have to go through the application process this time because we scored so highly at the state level that they offered us to just go straight through. And so we got that automatic grant renewal. And right before we went to press with our annual reports, we found that we had gotten another $232,000 grant, and that was to support after-school and summer programs. And that was a very important grant for us because we had the funding for the Bakersfield summer program had ended this past summer, and we were scurrying to try to figure out how are we going to be able to use the resources that we have to be able to offer it there. So this grant funding has secured that program. This goes through for 42 months, so we're pleased about that.
Kind of to tie this back to the earlier conversation around those position shifts, just to put a little downer on this. We are still in a year federally where we don't have a budget for the year that's going to end in the next 6 months. That is the mechanism that funds a lot of the grants that we are anticipating for next year. Right now we're seeing, almost $750,000 that's funding our after-school program. That comes from the feds ultimately. We know that the Title II money we get is one that has been floated to be eliminated completely. We get about $250,000 of that. We get about $1 million of Title I money, which they're proposing cutting back. We don't really know how much. Special ed money from the feds, we get about $750,000. That seems to be a little bit uncertain. And then finally, the food service program is also anticipating cuts, and we get at least $1 million from the feds on that. And that's the one that's the hardest to predict where that's going to end up. After the budget article, there's an article asking for the authority to move some of that surplus from the 2024 school year into the capital reserve fund that we'd established a long time ago. Normally, the board asks for half of that money left over. Usually, this is the one article that sails through every year. They reduced it to a quarter in order to put an extra $215,000 into buying down the tax rate for this year. Right now, the capital reserve fund, beginning of the year, the capital reserve fund was about $650,000. We're going to be tapping some of that, I anticipate, for that boiler project in Richford. The grants that Vern got cover roughly half of that, so we will have to make up the other half from somewhere.
So before I jump into this part, are there any questions on what I have presented, or do you want to wait and ask at the end? You want to wait? I'll keep going. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you've been watching the news or reading what is happening at the state level, we're finding ourselves in a situation where there's a lot of uncertainty, both at the Vermont level about where we're going with education, as well as the uncertainty that we just described at the federal level. So right now, the governor has made a proposal. This isn't something that is a done deal. It's a proposal that the governor has made to, he's calling it his bold education transformation plan. And so currently, this is what Vermont school districts and supervisory unions look like. We have 52 supervisory unions and supervisory districts around the state with 119 districts. And that's really pointing to, we're one supervisory union, but we have 2 districts in our supervisory union. There are 287 schools throughout the state that we fund for 83,733 publicly funded students. So the colors here really represent size. The darker the color, the more populated those school districts are. So in the governor's restructured school district proposal, he's proposing taking that from 52 down to 5. And so essentially what they did was they took the Vermont Superintendents Association. We have 5 regions, and that those regions were really developed to be able to identify where do we want superintendent collaborative groups to meet. So that I'm in here now in the Champlain Valley region, so that tells me each month who my collaborators are when we have our regional group meetings. So that was really the only purpose of what these regions were set for. But the governor has chosen to use that superintendent region as the 5 districts that are being proposed. So we would have 5, the Champlain Valley region, the Northeast region, Winooski Valley, Southwest, and Southeast region. So this would we would be in the Champlain Valley region. So that would really be schools from Richford all the way to Shoreham. So it's all of Franklin, all of Grand Isle, all of Chittenden, and about 2/3 of the Champlain Valley, of Addison counties. And that would be about 35,000 students. The other regions would be about 1/3 of that size, 1/3 to close to a half in one situation. So that would mean that each of these 5 regions would have one school board, and they would have one superintendent, one central office. So those school board positions would be elected, but they would be part-time paid board members. So what I'm hearing those be referred to as are quasi-professional board positions, where that would be people's jobs, at least part-time. I don't know more details than that. So currently there's no bill associated with the governor's plan. So for many weeks since the beginning of the legislative session, the Vermont Agency of Education has been visiting many of the committees that are considering this. So you have members in the House Education, House Ways and Means, Senate Education, and Senate Finance that are hearing testimony on this really regularly. And the Agency of Education is presenting a lot of data and a lot of reports for their consideration. So where those committees are, they're waiting for the details to respond to, because in order for the governor's plan to become a reality, it has to go through the legislative process and be reviewed and approved by the legislators. What is likely to happen is that this plan is the starting place, and the legislators will be considering other options as well. So I suspect it may not end at 5, but I do think there's definitely going to be significant restructuring of how we govern schools. I also, one of the things, a big part of this is how we fund schools as well. So this is a shift to a foundation formula model. So instead of us approving a budget and telling the state, this is how much money we need, and the state just says, okay, because that's how the system is. Last year, our taxpayers across Vermont, 33 districts, had their budgets defeated. So that was a clear message to Montpelier that there's a need for reform. So that's where all of this is coming from. So we'll see governance shifts, we'll see a funding formula shift, and there will be the conditions will be created so that we will no longer be able to operate the same number of students that we currently have. So I'll let you jump into timeline.
Sure, and so this is also very much in flux, and this is what the governor has proposed, and the legislature will have their hands on it as it goes through those committees. But in the year that we're living in now, we basically get legislation passed, and as of June, we move into next year. Next year, which is the budget year that we're voting on in March, the governor has proposed using some one-time money to buy down everyone's tax rates. So the rates that we just showed you tonight would be lower for each of the towns. And then the Agency of Education is going to start writing their rules on how big classrooms should be, how big schools should be, and start working on that. In 26-27, the second year out, those new districts, those 5 districts or however many we end up at, would elect their school boards, they would start to build their budget, they would start to build their central office staff. In June, we would start to close out those old districts. And so Lynn and I would be turning off the lights here, and whoever is the new superintendent down in that Champlain Valley would be getting ready to gear up. In 27, 28, that's the year that those new districts go live. The new funding formula would take place, and we can talk about that if folks are interested. It's basically a situation where, as opposed to now where the voters say, we want to spend this much money, the state is going to say, if you have this many kids, you get to spend this much money. They'll also be creating these school advisory councils, which they're still defining, but it's an attempt to give folks at the most local level, at the school level, some ability to impact how the budget money is spent at their schools, and how to develop the school improvement plans, which you can talk about.
I think that there are two things that I've heard would fall under the school advisory council, and that would be to make budgeting recommendations to that governing board at the district level. That they would, the only authority that they would really have would be to approve the school's continuous improvement plan, which that's a federal requirement that we have right now. We have to do those continuous improvement plans because we receive federal dollars. So if that is still something that we're receiving and it's still a requirement, that would be their responsibility to approve.
And then finally, in the 29 school year and beyond, that is when the state starts looking at the number of schools that we operate and the size of the schools we operate. And they start holding districts accountable to those rules about class size that they're developing next year.
So just last word I'll say on this is just remember this is the proposal, and it's got a long way to go to become law. But that's I wanted to present where it is currently. So we have town meeting day coming up. We certainly hope that people will head to the polls on March 4th. Here in Enosburg, it's at the fire station. Those polls open at 10 and they close at 7. Early voting is available now, so you can go to the town clerk's office and they'll give you a ballot so that you can vote. So, happy to entertain questions.
Some of those slides I couldn't find in here.
Yeah, they're not in there.
Where will we, because I should have said something earlier, ask for like that white part of that screen to become the full screen so we could have read some of the stuff a little bit better. There's a couple of things that.
Do you want us to go back? 'Cause
No, are we able to access any of that?
I think we can put those slides on pretty quickly.
Yeah, and there's a QR code in the annual report that brings you right to the budget website.
Okay.
And when we do that, because it's a Google Meet too, the slides don't really zoom very well, but the slides will be on the website, and
Okay.
the website has all of the slides that
Okay.
they talk
Well, it
about.
has all of the budget slides.
Okay.
It might not have
Yeah, it has
all of the
budget
other,
slides,
yeah.
Okay, all right.
So they will be on your website.
They are on the website now. The individual documents that we use to create these slides are all there. It's fnesu.org, and click on the link for FY26 budget. You'll see Enosburg, Richford on the left side.
I did print out the budget. There's
Okay.
something called documents, but there's nothing listed under documents.
Do you want to?
What do you mean?
See if I can find it.
I wonder if we have the like links beyond links on the webpage. We're still working out. That's a new web design, but you should be able to get everything budget right with one click from that homepage, right? Do you want to go there? Could you go to our webpage and show them where to find it?
Whatever.
It might look different on phone.
It might look different on a phone, but on the website, right on the top, if you're on a computer at least, it says FY26 budget.
Yeah.
And when you click on it, on on the left-hand side, you'll see all of Enosburg, Richford, and if you hit on these plus signs, it will have different, so if I go to the, like for example, if I go to property taxes, and if I just click on the first, the number 1, it will bring you to this. Like it'll bring you to a different, it's an individual document.
Yes, yeah, and see the pluses.
Yeah.
There's actually there's a lot more information on that website than what we shared tonight.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure. And then I will put under budget presentations, G, I already have Enosburg Elementary and Richford Elementary Schools,
The video.
the videos from Northwest Access. And then we will put the slide decks on as well.
Okay. I had a couple of questions on some numbers. I was wondering, on your proposed supervisory union budget, what are bill back expenses and bill back revenue?
Sure. So we have a number of staff who are paid partially out of the federal grants, and they only cover half of their salary, and the rest, the principals decided they want them full-time, and they're willing to pay that out of their local budget. And so in that case, we are the supervisory union, we want them to be only under one employer for their benefit. So half of that money goes to that federal grant, the other half goes to what we call a bill back account. We know that, say, that's really an expense that belongs at Enosburg High School, so we're paying for their teacher out of the SU, and we're just sending them a bill for what that teacher costs.
The grant money, is that the 4,000 account, federal revenue?
The 4,000 account on Enosburg side is the ROTC money we get for
No,
the.
this is on your supervisory union budget. Is $1,263,000.
Yeah, that's likely on that budget. That's most of the money that we get for food service. Because those federal grants like the Title I, Title II, we don't actually budget them through this process. They're considered supplemental money, so we have to sort of wait till we get that amount from them. In the supervisory union budget, that roughly $1 million of federal money is reimbursements that we get from the food service program.
Okay. Why is there deficit spending in this budget?
Because we, similar to that fund balance that we're asking permission to move to the capital reserve fund in Enosburg, the supervisory union also has a fund balance, and when that board met and developed this budget, they decided that to bring that assessment down, which is the part that Enosburg Richford pays and the part that NMV pays, they wanted to use some of that fund balance money to bring
That
the
doesn't show
assessment
up
down.
on here.
The fund balance
The
doesn't.
fund balance does
No,
not show up.
the use of the fund balance is just the difference between what we spend and what we think is coming in. So it's deficit spending, but it's spending down money that we have in the checking account now.
And on that account 5597, that's on the individual school accounts. It says service purchases from the supervisory union.
So that's on the school side, that's how we account for the money that they're sending to us for that teacher that we're paying for on their behalf.
So that'll show up as expense on
So
the
it's in-
school budget, but it's in,
But it's
where is it included on? Is it included as revenue over here on your supervisory budget?
Yep. So that's the bill back revenue.
Okay. Maybe. And the supervisory union budget overall is totally included within the Enosburg, Richford, and then the elementary schools. budgets. This isn't, we don't vote on it separately.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and that's just the structure that we have in Vermont, that the supervisory union board is sort of the voting body to pass that budget. And then the towns vote on those district level budgets. And that assessment is just a part of that.
That would change under the governor's proposal because there wouldn't be any supervisory unions left.
Right.
And the reason we have a supervisory union is because we have one district that tuitions students out and they didn't want to merge fully and give away that choice. So in a district like we're talking about in the governor's plan, you'd vote on all of it. It wouldn't be the way it's structured now.
Is it normal? You mentioned before that you had grant money, federal grant money to hire some interventionists, and now you're trying to bring those into the regular budget that is paid locally. Is that done normally? Because it's kind of hard to decide you're going to get a grant this year and next year you're going to have to pay out of pocket for that person.
So we don't do that often, but it was really important this year because we're anticipating that we don't know what we're going to get for federal funding for quite some time. So it varies. Sometimes we don't know until summer what that's going to be, but we have to know that we can pay the people that we have under contract. So we looked at overall how many, what's that budget look like for consolidated federal grants and the number of people who are working there. We know we have one person retiring. We're not going to fill that. We're going to hold that money because just in case we lose funding, we're not going to budget that out at all. And principals are nervous. They don't want to lose those positions. And with the uncertainty of that federal grant, we might be in a position where the board decides that they have to, it's called RIF, a teacher, to notify them that there might be a reduction in force because we don't know if we have that money or not. So we've been working really hard on building our system that supports students, and those interventionists are really critical for that to happen. And so those were conversations in those budget meetings with each of those principals that we can't lose that interventionist. So to make sure that we have that so that we can have a high functioning system within our school, we need that to become a local expense. They might still get, if we get more in grant money than we're anticipating, then we'll figure that out. That would be a good problem. But what we're hoping is that we have moved enough and we're not filling enough that if we get a reduction, it will not require us to reduce a staff member. So in that, does that make sense?
Somewhat.
Okay.
You have those interventions, or a number of them? How many are there?
I don't know how many we have totally. We have, in some schools, there are several interventionists. I think that I can look into that and I can get back to you.
How many students would they serve?
It depends on the school. The way it's structured is it's needs-based. So they work collaboratively with the teachers, and there's a time where intervention happens where the teachers pull students that need additional help, the interventionists pull students that need additional help, and there might be other people that pull students, but they all work together to identify what are those specific skills they need. So they might have, during this one block, they might have 5 students. During the next block, they might have 2 students, and so it's not fixed. They might have that for 6 weeks, and then they look at the data and they shuffle it around and they say, okay, now in this class, these are the 5 students that need this skill, and I'm going to target that. So I can't answer exactly how much they each have because it's a moving target all the time.
And if the program works right, I suppose in a year or 2, you should have enough data to say this was very successful, or it's not.
The
Just
interventionists
saving, yeah.
that we've had
Saving just one,
what do you mean saving one?
just one student, or helping one student move along.
Yeah, they're not helping just one. They've got 20, 30 students that they're helping every day, and probably more in some cases. Interventionists have been around a long time. I've been around a long time, and I was an interventionist 30 years ago. I started in that role. So that part's not new one. Any other questions?
You mentioned a little bit about the federal, loss of federal money. You're not sure how much it's going to be. I don't think anybody is.
Right.
And if that does come up, are we going to try to raise funds to replace it locally, or going to have to cut somewhere?
But we won't be able to raise any more. The only funds that we can raise are what you're voting on. So we can't, that's right. So we'll have to live within the bounds of what the voters approved. And so we'll have to look at, we probably will not have enough to cover all of it if there are significant cuts, but we don't know that yet. One of the things that we hope to be able to do is, if that happens, there are always teachers that come and go each year. So we might not fill some open positions until we know a little more about what's happening with the federal funds. And so we might be able to keep some of those teachers, but move them into other roles. So we're trying to be very thoughtful and strategic about what's going to land in front of us, but it's going to be challenging.
And it will also depend somewhat on what of those federal grants goes away, because the Title I grant is primarily used for interventionists. The Title II grant is primarily used for developing teachers. After-school grants, the after-school grant, special ed. So it'll be somewhat targeted depending on which funding stream is being cut, and also where the needs are. There's just only so much you can cut out of special ed, even if that money goes away, because you have some legal obligations there. We don't have legal obligations in some of those other programs.
Okay. Do you think Vermont education would work if you had just one administrative school or administrative department for all the schools in the state?
Do you mean one central office?
One central office.
I don't know that I could answer that question. I don't know. I don't know how it will work with 5, and I wouldn't want to say to you, yeah, I think it could work, because I wouldn't know what that structure was. So I would need to know the details to be able to weigh in on whether or not I think that a structure like that could work.
You look at the state of Vermont, it's so small compared to a lot of other states, and even it's much smaller than a lot of school districts in the nation. And we've got 52 or more administrative offices, central offices now. Just seems like a waste.
Well, under this plan, you should see far fewer. And I don't disagree that we need to restructure. I think that in order to make education more affordable in Vermont, we have to think about how many districts do we need, what's the right size of the district. We have to think about how we're funding it, because in Vermont's constitution, we're supposed to guarantee a substantially equal educational opportunity for all students. And when I showed you that visual that had us way down at the bottom and those way up at the top, we're not doing that right now. And our students are disadvantaged by the current system. So I think that we do need a shift, but it's very hard, and we need to operate. Unfortunately, if we want to be able to afford the education system, we do have to work within a better economy of scale in terms of the number of schools as well. And I know that's an unpopular thing to say, but if we really want to make it more affordable, we need to do those things. But it is hard to respond to what level or what structure without having any details yet to respond to in this plan. But I do agree in concept that we've heard loudly and clearly that there are things that we need to work on. And at the same time, I think that there are other things in our state that we need to work on. I think we need to think about our healthcare system and how we're going to make that function. And I think housing and there are several other things. I think mental health is a huge thing that we need to work on. And I think it is actually a large cost driver in the education fund. And that's not visible because schools have had to absorb so much of the mental health system and support because our mental health agencies have been level funded for so long that they can't offer what needs to happen. And so we've had to build systems internally. Mm-hmm. So there is change that's needed. Do you want to add anything?
Do you?
I agree completely. And part of the question I think needs to be, what do we want the education system to look like? Because as you get bigger, if you had one superintendent for the state, they wouldn't be an educator, they would be a lawyer. And they would have 10 regional superintendents under them who might be educators, and they would have a bunch of people under them, and that's where you would actually have educators. So it's also, what do we want the system to look like?
And I think we can't lose sight of in all of this is what do we want for our students? And I think in a lot of these conversations, I'm not hearing a lot of that. Like we need to Nate's point, it's very clear when we talk about career and tech centers, we want our kids to be employable and we want them to be prepared to go out to the world and get high wage, high demand jobs. And we need to think about what do we want for all students in the system. And if we can identify what we want for all students in the system in terms of those skills they need to go out and to be successful, whether it's college, career, military, whatever it is, then we need to think about, are we building a system that will get us to that goal is the other piece.
Go back and visit the math and reading proficiencies, and they start in kindergarten for some of those earlier childhood years. Do you provide the students with a tablet or anything and send work home with them and they have to bring it back or do it?
So not as much bringing work home to do at home because what we have found and what the research shows is that kids who are disadvantaged already are further disadvantaged when work is expected at home because there's no condition for that to happen in many of their homes. So they definitely have tablets. They definitely have the ability to, can we call these tablet? No, Chromebooks are mostly what we have, but there are things on there that they could do. It might not be a have to that they have to do, but there are things that they could do, and there are sites that they could use, digital tools that they could use to practice skills. But we also don't have a level playing field in Vermont in terms of internet access and even broadband access. So using those as home tools are a little bit problematic.
I asked that because I was in Georgia with a granddaughter probably 4 years ago, and her kindergarten year was spent at a Montessori school, and she came home every night and she had math problems, she had sight words, and she spent a half hour, 45 minutes, sometimes a little bit more, but I helped her get through stuff because she did a lot of it on her own, and I think she came out a much better student. Mm-hmm. I think very intelligent when you come out of, even in her case, kindergarten, and going into first grade with that. But as I can see your concern here that the internet service isn't available to a lot of them, but still it puts that sense of responsibility on them that we've got to do this, and not just something they do in school and come home and forget about it.
Yeah, we definitely have parent involvement activities where we encourage people to come in and we talk to them about how you could do, how can you work on literacy at home, how can you work on math games at home, things like that to try to get them more engaged. And I think we have some families that are very engaged with their families, and I think that we have some that are not.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But they had to do it. They didn't. It was almost like, okay, you don't get out of kindergarten if you don't hand in that paper. You have to hand it in every night. Electronically, they have to hand it in. I thought that was a very good education.
yeah, there are a lot of tools that we have that I think are really helping kids, and I appreciate you sharing that piece from your experience.
Okay. I think that's as much as I was
That's okay.
going to bring up.
I'm not sure that this is a question for this meeting, but I can ask anyway. I noticed that high school math scores have improved for any grade in high school.
On the STAR assessment, yes, the scores are what the scores are. One of the things that we're trying to help kids to understand is, why do we take this STAR assessment and why does it matter? And we've gotten feedback, and you could probably speak to this better than I can, but I don't think all of our kids see the benefit of doing their best on this assessment, and I think that it's been a little bit of a challenge to get a true measure of what they can do.
I'm sure that's true, but it was the same children taking it in the fall that are taking it in the winter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the proficiency rates have gone down at every grade level in high school.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely not pleased about where we are there, but I think that there's work that we need to continue to do, and we are. Do you want to talk a little bit about the math work that our high school teachers are doing?
Sure.
Yeah.
The math teachers at the high school have been working on sort of revising and rethinking how they're teaching, what they're teaching, and the math practices. The K-8 team is also, so it's actually K-12 is working on what they can do to sort of improve the use of math practices, the increased conceptual understanding of math, and trying to address some of those issues, increasing discourse around math in the classroom, getting kids to really talk about it, and getting kids to generalize the procedural math that they're learning to more sort of authentic, real experiences, so they can make connections and have to pull on it more frequently. So they're kind of spiraling those skills. They're not just learning it and then moving on, learning it and then moving on, but they're coming back to it in real situations. So the math team's been working pretty hard on that. And they're using some after hours time to do some book studies, working with Mary Ellis both to improve that. So they're working on it. I think, like Lynn said, it's hard to get a handle on that one STAR measure. When STAR doesn't show a clear improvement over time, or even a realistic or understandable view, like they probably didn't get worse from fall to winter. Or we need some other measures to triangulate that with, looking at some data from inside the classroom or some other sort of data to triangulate what's going on there. So it's tough at the high school to figure out what the cause is. It's hard to drill down. It's a little harder to drill down, I think, on what's causing the scores. Is it the skills? Is it the test taking? Is it the conceptual understanding or misunderstanding? So it's just a little trickier to figure out what the cause is and then address it.
There are other measures, though. That's not the only measure.
Correct.
We have a common assessment plan, and there are other common tools that they're using to assess where the students are. So this is just one that we pulled out because it was something that was in common for first grade through 12th grade. So that's why we chose to put
It
that
is
piece
the
in.
only K-12
Yeah.
common assessment.
What were the tests we did when we were in school? Every couple of years?
Well, there've been a lot, like CTBS, NSRE. I'm trying to think of what some of those older ones were.
I don't remember what I took because
I mean, we've had kneecap and SBAC, and now we're at VTCAP, and There are all kinds of assessment measures and do you remember any of the earlier versions?
Well, I think the earliest one I remember was CTBS, I think.
Yeah.
And I do know, high school kids obviously don't put the effort into it. But what concerned me was that it was the same kids from fall to winter.
Yeah.
And things didn't get better. They seemed like they've gotten worse.
Well, one of the things that in the system that we're building to support learning is that where we hope to get it, it's been a heavier lift to get there at the high school level, but that MTSS system, when we're talking about intervention, that's happening across all of our K-8 and K-5 schools. We should have a highly functioning MTSS system at our high school too, so we have a strong connection to the skill gaps that students have and having an opportunity for them to go and get support to be able to build that before they get to a place where they need special education. Like we want to continue to work to strengthen those MTSS systems at the high school. And I think if we start connecting the skills that they show on those assessments that they're lagging, if the connection is we're going to work on intervention to build those skills with you, they might all of a sudden realize there's a purpose to this assessment and then identify maybe I do want to show what I know because I don't want to, not a punishment thing, but like I don't think yet that they understand the purpose of why they take the assessment. And once, I think our elementary and middle school students definitely do, because it's how we help to decide where they get those supports. And kids are very engaged with, I beat my score and I grew 50 points.
There's
And
a definite difference between elementary and
yeah, definitely.
Is there a financial literacy class that's mandatory at the high school level?
It is not, the class itself is not mandatory for 9 through 12, but class of 2028 has financial literacy indicators that are required for graduation, and Deb Tannenberger at Petersburg teaches a financial literacy
I knew she
class.
taught one, but I didn't know if it was mandatory.
Richford High School
Mandatory,
is.
but now that it's a graduation requirement for 2028, class of 2028, it will be a good way for them to get it. It's not the only way that they can get it, but that is a good way, and it's offered at Richford. And Sarah Jo does something financial literacy, so.
Thank you both for coming out and being our crowd today. We appreciate it.
I'll give you another,
Thank you for the presentation and the pizza.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'll give you another little smile. I
What?
have a son in New Hampshire. He's a roofing contractor. School was not his best forte, either high school, elementary. Went to college maybe 2 weeks out of a semester, didn't last. And then he decided to get into construction. So it's a very successful roofing contractor, using geometry and algebra, doing mainly sheet metal roofing, but he does copper, he does slate and everything else. And he sent me a picture of one slate roof he put on. This whole house was curved. He had to cut each of those slates. He said, you don't know how much I had to fall back on all my math courses. And
Yeah, that's true.
I wish I would have spent more
Yeah.
attention on that.
That's part of what Gab was describing, is helping kids to see the connection. Like, I didn't know what Pythagorean theorem actually did until I was an adult when I tried to build a ramp. And then I went, oh, that's
Wow,
what that
that's
formula was for,
And
right?
they forget it for the test,
Yeah.
you know.
But they do. My son called me years after he graduated and said, he remembered part of it. He said, can you just run it by me again, Mom? I have to do it with roofing. And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, I just couldn't remember what it was called and all of that, to be sure. So they do remember part of it.
It comes back eventually, right?
Yeah.
When they
and
need it.
And they realize the connection later, but not, you have no idea how many times I had kids ask, when am I ever going to use this? Not geometry so much, but algebra, all the time.
Yeah, so they're working on embedding that more in the process of the class. It doesn't seem so distant.
Thank you.
Thank you.